Hello, and happy Friday the 13th. I wanted to do something special because we don't always get a Friday the 13th in October. So this is a pretty big event. I mean, it's going to be a while before this probably happens again. So, for this video, I'm going to be going into my theory of Jason Voorhees. And just everything about him. That includes how he got his powers, how the movies are all correct. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this special episode. My Friday the 13th theory. Okay, so Friday the 13th. If you've watched the franchise, you'll notice that there's some inconsistencies at first. There's some things that just don't make a lot of sense. So, before I go any further, I just want to strongly say, spoiler alert. Big time. There are going to be major spoilers for the movies. So if you have not watched the franchise, come back after you do, because I don't want to spoil it. If you lived under a rock and you've managed to avoid spoilers so far. But anyways, let's go ahead and dive into the character of Jason Voorhees. Okay, so the story of Jason, I believe, really honestly goes back much further than the boy or the man himself. It goes all the way back to probably the early settlement days, when the land was inhabited by Native Americans. Before even people, the English and the Dutch and all the other settlers from everywhere else came to this land. Back then, there was a tribe known as the Nanticoke tribe. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that exactly right, but that's what we're going to go with. The Nanticoke tribe. And the Nanticoke tribe, they had settlements all in the area that you're seeing on screen now. And it's here where our story begins. So I believe, first off, I know Camp Crystal Lake is a fictional place, but it was mainly filmed in locations in and around New Jersey. So, what happened? So, as settlers started coming here, there was in this fictional area, in this fictional town, there was a small tribe of these Indians, or Native Americans, whatever you want to call them. I prefer Indians just because it's simpler, and that's what I grew up with them being called. So, if I'm not politically correct enough for you, I'm sorry. But the Indians in the area, they were attacked. They were driven out of their home, and they traveled down towards the lake, which probably had a different name at the time. And one of their shamans cursed the land so that bad things, that a bad omen would sit over the town. That the settlers were going, that he knew one day the settlers would build. But before he could complete his curse or bad omen, I'm not sure of what the magical system for the Native Americans are, but this spiritual person, he didn't quite get to finish and was killed off before he could. And one of the things that had happened is his blood got into the lake water. And the settlers buried the bodies in the forest, and they used the nearby land far enough away from the lake because they didn't want to be reminded of exactly what they had done, and they were going to set up irrigation to get water from the lake anyway, so they built a town a distance away, calling the town Crystal Lake. And I just want to throw in real quick right here that throughout the movies there are implications of a Native American tribe being around. As you can see in this picture here, there is a totem pole. And if you watch this quick clip, then you can also see that, yeah, he's dancing around like an Indian, but that is probably an implication that there used to be Native Americans in the area. Alright, so we have this war that wiped out this tribe. Now let's go ahead and move much further up the timeline. Now this is going to be important later because of the fact you need to know how the area came into possession of European settlers, or Dutch settlers, or Swedish settlers. I don't know which group would have probably, but there was a image that I'm putting up on screen now, which showed that at some point the Indians and the settlers, they did come to some sort of treaty, and this picture was drawn to symbolize, to mark that, which I believe said it was Swedish settlers. So the Swedish settlers, they came to a peace with the remaining Indians, and there was no more war between them. And the Swedish settlers helped the Native Americans battle, other tribes that try to take over their land. But this was all happening away from where Crystal Lake was now being built. So like I said, we're going to move up the timeline. Now we're going to go to Jason's mother. So, Jason's mother, back in the 1940s, it was like around 1944, she had a steady boyfriend, and I believe at this time, I don't know if she had an after-school job or whatnot, but a new kid showed up. Somebody who was just passing by. She was probably around like 17 at the time, maybe even possibly 16, and this kid was 18, and he was passing through, and that was Jason's father. Pamela was immediately drawn to him. There was something special about this guy, something unique that she just latched onto. And I believe that at that moment, the influence of Jason's father, which will become important later, seduced Pamela into having sex with him. And from that, she became pregnant. Like I said, she did have a steady boyfriend, but she cheated on her boyfriend to be with Jason's father. It was just a one-night thing, but there's a reason for it. And after finding out that she was pregnant, she had to come clean, and her parents disowned her because they thought she was, in the phrasing of that day and age, that she was unclean, she was dirty, basically calling her a whore for having premarital sex, because her parents are very religious. They grew up in a town where they're highly religious, and they raised her to be a good girl, and she wasn't good anymore because she got pregnant. This also caused her to lose her boyfriend. Her boyfriend broke up with her because she was unfaithful, and she begged and probably pleaded for him to stay, but he didn't want, as he would probably have said, damaged goods. So this just completely destroyed her as a person, and she had to basically be a teenage mother who had to start life much earlier than expected. She continued going to school. She worked jobs to pay her rent. She tried to be a good, caring mother, but due to the time period and everything she was going through, she wasn't taking very good care of herself, which caused some deformities with Jason's birth. Now, Jason was already, because of a family line, because of a genetic line in Jason's family on the mother's side, and because at this point Pamela was, like I said, not taking very good care of herself, Jason was born with a severe case of Down syndrome, and he came out deformed. And even though this happened, she still loved her son. She was a good mother. She took excellent care of Jason, maybe a little too much, never letting him do anything that she would consider dangerous, always, but at the same time, she would probably fly off the handle anytime he did something bad. So, whenever something was wrong, whenever he did a bad thing, he would watch his mom fly into a rage, maybe she like slapped him really hard or something, but he survived it. And she would immediately, go to him and show him that she loved him. But there would always be that mental image in his mind that somebody does something wrong, you react. You show them that they did something wrong. And that's how Jason learned that. That's a primary thing he learned. You mess up, you get punished. Now this is going to play into something else that I'm going to get into in a little bit. But, as I was saying, so then when Jason is about 11 years old, he gets a chance to go and be a normal kid during the summer because the mother, Miss Pamela Voorhees, she gets a great job where it's going to be free living, free food, great pay. All they have to do is stay there for the summer at a campground by the lake where Jason can go and play with the other kids. But Mrs. Voorhees isn't so happy about that part because of Jason's deformities. Because Jason, in her eyes, is a special kid and needed special care. But, of course, as we all know, the camp counselors, they didn't keep an eye on him. The camp counselors were off. Well, I'll let Mrs. Voorhees say it.
Oh, this place. Steve should never have opened this place again. There's been too much trouble here. Did you know that a young boy drowned the year before those two others were killed? The counselors weren't paying any attention. They were making love while that young boy drowned. His name was Jason. I was working the day that it happened, preparing meals. Here, I was the cook. Jason should have been watched every minute. He wasn't a very good swimmer. We can go now, dear.
I think we should wait for Mr. Christie.
Oh, that's not necessary.
I don't understand.
I am Jason. I am. You see, Jason was my son, and today is his birthday.
So anyways, Jason drowns at this point. And during his struggle, he is kicking and screaming and drowning, and nobody hears him. Nobody comes to save him. But he's kicking up dirt underneath. He's kicking up this like statue or something. Basically, Jason's quote-unquote death enacts the final part of the Native American curse. And the spirits of the dead, they come to Jason in his time of need, and they pull him to the shore. They drag him off into the forest to take care of him, to bring him back. And Jason is now, because he was drowned almost, he was actually like he was filling up with water. He's unconscious. He's in a coma. But the Native American spirits bring him back. They get rid of the water in his lungs. They save his life, essentially. But now Jason is too far out of the way of Crystal Lake. They took him deep, deep into the woods where their home used to be, where their tribe used to actually, before they moved to the lake, their first location, they brought him there where it was still peaceful, where it was still safe. And over the years, Jason would be taught to live and survive through the spirits. Now, this is why his father was so important, because later on in the franchise, we do see that characters come in with psychic powers, as you'll see right here. And in another movie, I'm pretty sure it's not that one. In another movie, there is actually a thing about there being others, in the family line of Jason, the family line of Voorhees. Which, that starts to get all weird and stuff, but it fits, because if the father had been a traveler, had been someone who was just passing through and slept with Pamela, then of course he would have had more kids down the road with other people. And I believe that Jason's father was heavily psychic. And he knew it. And he was able to use that power to get into people's minds, and he probably used it to get into the minds of women. Not necessarily to make them feel a certain way, but to open the door and to say, hey, let me in. Let's go make love. Because I love you. And the women, they were just like, okay, yeah. Now, Pamela herself might have had a small flicker of psychic power too, because of her upbringing and always being so secluded, but she was definitely stressed out, because the way she would have raised Jason would have been the same way she was raised. If she was bad, she was severely punished, which is why being pregnant before being married is what caused her family to disown her. So there might have been if we go by the Stephen King version, a little bit of a shine there. So Jason, growing up in the woods, he would have seen the spirits. He was probably so psychic that he could actually see the spirits. And because they were so far out of range, they never found his body in the lake. Which is why they actually say, his body was never recovered, as shown here.
I don't want to scare anyone, but I'm going to give it to you straight about Jason. His body was never recovered from the lake after he drowned. And if you listen to the old-timers in town, they'll tell you he's still out there. Some sort of demented creature surviving in the wilderness. full grown by now. Stalking. Stealing what he needs, living off wild animals and vegetation. Some folks claim they've even seen him, right in this area. The girl who survived that night at Camp Blood, that Friday the 13th, she claims she saw him. She disappeared 2 months later. Vanished. Blood was everywhere. No one knows what happened to her. Legend has it that Jason saw his mother beheaded that night, and that he took his revenge. A revenge that he'll continue to seek if anyone ever enters his wilderness again. And by now, I guess you all know, we're the first to return here. 5 years. 5 long years he's been dormant. And he's hungry. Jason's out there. Watching. Always on the prowl for intruders. Waiting to kill. Waiting to devour.
So yes, Jason's body is never recovered, but nobody can explain why. They sent out a search party through the woods to think, okay, maybe he got to shore and wandered off. But no matter how far they searched, they didn't find him. That's because he was much further than they searched. He was out of the search range, and honestly, most people didn't care. The only one that really cared was Pamela, but she was, just a grieving mother. Everyone was sure that his body had to be somewhere down the lake, or because the lake, which this is important, because the lake actually does empty out into a river, he could have been sucked on down the river currents and out to sea. So it's very possible that his body may never have been recovered. But that is the point, because of the fact that there was always that chance, and the cops were just like, well, we can't search, we can go and try to do the river, but if he's down the river, he's probably out to sea by now. And good luck finding him in the ocean. Now, this is actually important because of the fact that we know that Camp Crystal Lake does empty out into a river because of Jason Takes Manhattan. Because New Jersey is actually pretty close, and this is a fictional, but on this map you can see there are rivers that empty out into the ocean. So it's very plausible that, they would have chartered a boat, sailed it up the river to Camp Crystal Lake, where they got on board, and then sailed it out down the river, out to the sea, up to New York for a vacation. Which is how Jason Takes Manhattan comes into this. So as you're seeing, all these pieces really do fit together. But now, let's do the biggest one that's going, because I've done speculation, but let's tie this together. Let's tie this into a nice little bow. Okay, so I've claimed that Jason has psychic powers. Well, what about when he died? Why does he keep coming back? Because he was actually killed. And then he was brought back. But here's the thing. I believe that over the years that Jason grew up in the forest, he underwent rituals that were done to him by the Native American spirits, which tied Jason's body to the very land and to the lake itself, that he would slumber, but he would never truly be killed. Now, if he ever was put into this slumber, it would be until the land was threatened. Now, this is a very vague, probably, determination of the land is threatened. But, I've had a buddy who we've talked about, he's like, oh, that Friday the 13th makes no sense. Why does Jason keep killing the camp counselors? And I thought about it, and that's what made me think of this theory. Jason is the protector of the forest. He cannot be killed because, he cannot be truly killed because the forest keeps bringing him back to stop people from sinning, to stop people from doing drugs, to stop people from committing crimes, or just stop invading his land. Just the act of crossing over into territory that does not belong to you is enough to incur his wrath, which is why he leaves most everyone that stays out alone. Like, he never goes out into the town to go kill anyone unless he's already got them as a target. And that brings me to Friday the 13th Part 2. Why did he target that girl from the first movie? Well, because of all his victims, he was really angry about her. He did watch his mother get killed. He was on the other side of the lake. He was already on his way to deal with, this disturbance in his forest. And as he reached the edge of the lake, he watched this girl decapitate his mother. He instantly recognized his mother, who, even though he hadn't seen her in years, he knew her then. He knew her by sight. And it made him so angry. But he couldn't do anything about it. Now, at this point, he still wasn't a good swimmer. He didn't know his limitations or lack thereof. He didn't know how immortal he was. So the girl was in a boat. And the only thing he could think to do was attack her psychically, causing her to fall into the water. With the cops, they got her and they saved her, took her to a hospital, and then she was off the water. Well, now Jason could go and track her down. He had psychically linked up with her in that dream. Well, she thought she was just dreaming. Well, she thought she was safe in that boat. She was safe, but it gave Jason the ability to latch onto her like he does in that scene. That scene is symbolic, I think, of him latching onto her. And from there, he can sense where she is and follow her, which takes him outside. Now, if he were killed outside of the grounds of Camp Crystal Lake, I think that could actually permadeath, you could say, Jason, for at least a while. I mean, it would be much more than his slumber, as we saw in the one where Tommy Jarvis brings him back. I think his body was buried outside of the forest, actually in the town, which is out of the range of the forest. So it took a third party to interfere, which brought him back. A part of that force is always inside him. There's actual organisms that are keeping him alive, if you break it down scientifically like they do in Jason X, where they show that he basically has superhuman powers. But those powers mainly only work near Camp Crystal Lake, and only if certain conditions are met. If there's like air or something. But Jason was in a box. He was buried. He was under the ground. The air couldn't get to him. The dirt couldn't get to him. So he had to wait for someone to dig him up and start bringing him back to life. And the electricity just gave him an extra boost, which supercharged the cells and immediately allowed him to, come back. Now, if he had died or been killed on the grounds of Camp Crystal Lake, he probably would have just slumbered until someone trespassed on his territory again. After the force and the spirits had time to patch him up. Sew him back together, so to speak. Now, I just want to add in real quick, there was a moment in the first movie that implicates that Pamela, during the years, after her son's death, that she might have been the one who had been doing things to the area to make sure that the camp was never reopened.
Oh, I couldn't let them open this place again. Could I? Not after what happened. Oh, my sweet, innocent Jason. My only child. Jason. You let him drown. You never paid any attention.
So that's my theory on Jason Voorhees. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you agree? Do you disagree? I mean, we may never get the answer to this. We may never actually know that this is. But, I mean, if you want to look at it from a storyteller's point of view, this ties a lot of it together. This ties a lot of everything into a nice, neat bow. You could even go so much further as to say, and this is something that kind of like is brought up through the movies, not necessarily, but you could say that like some of the characters, even though Jason is dead or slumbering, dreaming at this point, that there's enough of Jason still around where he is a spirit. He's out of his body like an astral projection. So, like with Roy, who takes up the mantle of Jason to kill people, it is Roy, but he's being guided or controlled partly by Jason Voorhees, who's using him like a puppet, because this is in the wheelhouse of Jason's psychic powers. But once Jason became a zombie, he probably realized that he didn't have as good a psychic powers as before, so he didn't have much more control. But he had immortal life now, so it's a take your pick kind of poison. Do you want the psychic powers or do you want the immortal life? And this theory honestly, making Jason a guardian of the forest is also a good way to explain how a group of, or any teenager or any young person can be running at full speed away from him, and suddenly he gets in front of them. Now, I know in the game they had like a teleport feature for Jason, but I always thought that was stupid until I thought of this theory. Until I thought of that, I'm like, well, if the Native Americans made him part of the land, if he was the ultimate protector of the forest, then maybe that could give him like some warping ability through that forest, but only in that forest. Only on the grounds where he was the protector. Because we never see him do anything like that anywhere else. But he would always have his super strength, super healing. That would always be a part of him. That would always be in his core, so to speak. So anyways, that's going to end this theory. If you want to check out, I actually wrote something similar, because I know that this will never be an official thing, like we'll never get an official answer. But I actually wrote a book, a little mini book for Halloween called The Legend of Fort Blood, which kind of plays with this theory in my own way, with my own characters, set back in like a medieval time setting. So if you liked this theory, definitely consider checking out that little short story. And if you enjoy that, why not check out some more? I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to try to convince my daughter to watch a scary movie tonight. So with that said, I will see you all in the next episode. Bye.